All right, guys. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of All Nighter Discussions. Here we have my good friend Mitchell joining us. Hey, Mitch, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you, Gabe?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for coming on to the program.
Oh, yeah. Glad to be on. Yeah.
I know we share a taste for kind of odd movies, kind of weird movies that are a little different, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, the two movie posters you have up, I know, are for Blue Velvet and what was the other one?
Idiocracy.
Idiocracy, the
Yeah,
Mike Judge classic. So you
that's
really
right.
covered the whole spectrum.
Yeah, not really my favorite Mike Judge film, to be honest, but it is the poster I have. So,
Yes.
have some respect for Idiocracy, Luke Wilson.
I actually just watched Office Space for the first time the other day. Have you seen that?
Oh yeah, that might be my favorite Mike Judge movie, actually.
That's a classic for sure. That was a great watch. I don't know if it's a cult movie anymore. I think it's too popular now. It's too widely celebrated, but that was a really cool experience watching that. And I gotta
Yeah.
ask, does Mike Judge have like a Houston connection? Because he plays exclusively ghetto boys on the soundtrack.
I think he might have a Houston connection. I know that King of the Hill is also set in like like a town near Houston, basically.
Yeah, in that part
Um,
of Texas. So
yeah.
he must be like from Texas or have that connection. Anyways, but yeah, Mike Judge is in no way a subject of this episode, but as a sidebar, go check out Office Space and Idiocracy if you haven't
Yeah,
had the chance.
got to do it.
And Beavis and Butthead Do America. So we're done
And
plugging
Silicon
Mike.
Valley, and all of his stuff. I don't know.
Dude, I just started watching that too.
It's so good.
You know, I'm gonna have to change the episode of this completely. Now we're just gonna talk about Mike Judge. That's where we're
Okay.
headed right now. No.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think, kind of as a segue, this is about as far from Mike Judge as you can get in some ways.
Yeah.
This,
But it's interesting because the movie we're about to talk about is kind of a dark mirror to Beavis and Butthead, don't you think?
I had never had considered that before, but yeah, it is in a lot of ways about the same sort of relationship.
And it's during that same time. It's very much a product of that time. So we're talking about the movie Super Dark Times. I did not see this when it came out. I saw it on Netflix a few years ago, and I showed it to you, Mitchell. Did I not?
Yes, you did. And it was a instant memorable favorite of mine as far as like this sort of genre goes and these sort of characters.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I had to really talk you into watching it because I wasn't doing a good job of selling it. I really don't want to give anything away to someone who hasn't seen it.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely want to watch the movie before you listen to anybody talk about it or watch any trailers, because
Yes.
it's definitely something that you just want to come into like I did, not knowing anything about it.
Right. And I was just watching your reaction the whole time because there are so many points in the movie, so many kind of oh shit moments,
Yeah.
so many twists and turns. So for anyone who has not seen the movie, please go watch it before you listen to the rest of this podcast because this is a spoiler discussion, but right now we're just recommending it. It's one of my favorite movies of recent years. I think in terms of being like a midnight movie or a cult movie, it deserves to be more widely seen, but it kind of does have that cult status, I think.
It's got a lot of heart too,
Oh yeah.
You got a lot of really good performances from young, unknown. Well, I don't know if unknown. I'm not too familiar with some of the actors of their work, but
Mm-hmm. So
young,
I've
really young
seen, yeah.
actors really giving great performances.
So I've seen many of the actors here in television. The guy, one of the two, I think Josh is an actor on Ozark. He's a pretty big
Okay.
actor on Ozark. And the mother that we see. She's done a lot of work. I know her mostly as the mom from 13 Reasons Why. Poor woman. No, but she's also been in a lot of really good movies. Blue Ruin, another film I'd love to talk about on this program. She was in that.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, like we have a lot of great talent for sure in the cast.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was the director's first feature,
It
and
was.
for that, that's pretty impressive too.
Yeah, what a vision that guy had. And we're obviously going to dive into it. So from here on out, spoiler discussion. I assume if you're listening to it, you've either seen it or you have no intention of seeing it. All right. So Super Dark Times, just to set it up, is about these two friends, these two kind of loner friends in high school during like the mid 90s.
Yeah.
And one of them accidentally kills another kid with a katana. And the rest of the movie is their attempts to cover it up and the paranoia that encompasses it it has a great premise, but the plot is very loose in terms of setup and payoff. It's a lot more abstract about that. So I was
Right.
one
It's not a procedural film at all.
no, not at all. It's very psychological. So how did you like the movie's pacing when you first saw it?
Well, I think when I first saw it, I didn't I enjoyed the pacing because I didn't know what to expect was going to happen. Like for example, you kind of get this sense that it's going to be a little bit more like super bad or something than it ends up being, and there's a large shifts in the characters' whole personality really as the result of all really stemming from the accident from Daryl's death, right? I think you can say, but yeah, I mean, just as a result of that, I didn't really know what to expect. And every time one of those shifts did happen, I think it sort of heightened the stakes and got me, engaging more with the film each time. And that's what I think makes it so great. Because by the end of the movie, you're totally, unless it really doesn't click with you, I think you're going to totally be on the edge of your seat.
Yeah, dude, when I first saw this, it was just anxiety on film for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's largely thanks to the two performances, our two lead characters. I think these guys are great. I think they have a fantastic chemistry, the perfect chemistry. I was so invested in their friendship. And it's weird because they're losers, right? I mean, the first time you see them, they're going through their yearbook and they're playing a game of, would you do her? Would you do her? No, she's too ugly. And like, one of the first lines I remember is, "Oh, I would fuck her during the talent show," or something weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet I
It's
cared about them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, these type of characters, they're definitely not trying to idealize anyone, and really it's a lot like, sort of some of these classic horror movies where you might have like an ensemble cast and they're all kind of shitty people in some way or the other. But like it kind of really laser focuses on this friendship dynamic. It's almost like picking them out of a crowd and then zooming in. And they're just real. It gives you a sense they're more real in that way. And it makes it so I think that's part of why you connect so much when, Josh starts killing people or, Zach starts having mental breakdowns, that kind of thing. You don't really, it doesn't really like seem so artificial as it could.
No, it seems totally authentic to the high school experience. And that's the other thing that really threw me off, is just how real it felt. Obviously, it's a really unique situation that they're going through, this covering up a murder, but just this kind of like apathy of high school culture. And especially in the mid 90s, I think this is set right before Columbine. And that was the atmosphere. People were desensitized, they were apathetic. I think a big theme of the movie is these two kind of like, they feel so isolated that they don't know who to turn to. They can't turn to anyone for help. And that's why Josh takes the path that he does.
Yeah, it's sort of like the setup for the ending is like the answer to the question of why does it happen, right? Like you don't even know that's really the question the movie's going to be asking necessarily. Like why would somebody snap in this way? How do these kids become so isolated? Yeah.
And it's so real in that there is no one answer. You know, you get a sense of Josh as a guy. He seems pretty bitter. He seems like he's a very resentful person. He's obviously very socially awkward. He has a hard time relating to people. So it doesn't come out of nowhere. But at the same time, there's not one thing that well, there's Daryl's death, but still there's no one thing that makes him snap. But I didn't even know the movie was going in that direction, right? I didn't think we were going to have an antagonist, a killer by the end. Did you
Right.
expect that?
No, not at all. I mean, you don't expect a love triangle either, even though they kind of
Mhm.
hint at it at the beginning. It's they really kind of play into that. Like nobody's really happy in that situation. You know,
Nobody's happy in this movie.
yeah. No, nobody's winning in this love triangle here, and
Yeah, with their friend, played by, I think the actress's name is Emily Cappuccino. I remember her last name is Cappuccino. We made many jokes about that during our first screening of the movie.
oh my god, yeah, probably so. But no, yeah, she has a great performance as well. I mean, kind of you kind of get this sort of sense like she could be sort of an operator in some ways compared to these two guys who are really
Yeah.
struggling to control their emotions and deal with reality, you know?
Yeah. So there's a fan theory that I would like to get at later on in the podcast, but she does give a great performance. And for a long time, she really seems like she's the one beacon of light, of genuine optimism. She's like a very cheerful, kind of buoyant personality. She has a
Yeah.
great sense of humor. And the tragic thing is that Zach, our other lead, he's so off put by the murder, by the killing, that when the girl of his dreams finally starts putting the moves on him, he can't reciprocate no matter how much he wants to, because he's just that detached now.
Yeah. And it's like hard to watch that stuff, you know? Because you want these characters to get a win somewhere.
Mhm.
You kind of want Josh to chill out. At least I felt that way. I didn't,
Oh yeah.
I felt like I didn't want to see any of what ended up happening, taking place, but it's like you can't stop watching.
Yes, it's the tragedy of teenage apathy, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that's why it resonates so much with us, as young guys who I felt like I could have been those guys back in high school, right? I think it's an experience that a lot of people go through. I wouldn't call them incels, but I feel like they kind of harken back to that too, with how badly they seem to get along with the women in their lives.
Well, yeah, I think you see kind of a split happen, right? Like at the beginning, it's sort of some almost like, very juvenile behavior, right? And then
Mhm.
as the plot progresses, Zach kind of I feel like shifts a little bit in a different direction as a result of the just kind of taking things way more seriously, in terms of the consequences, right? And Josh kind of has the opposite effect.
Yeah,
He's like, yeah,
there's a progression and a regression
yeah.
because of
And
this.
I think the weed is kind of a symbol of that in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
and the
You know,
katana, right?
yeah. Everything
Yeah,
they take from the brother basically is like this Pandora's box.
exactly. And it kind of does make me think of those old school slashers where if you do the sinful thing, if you have sex, or if you do drugs, that's what invites the evil.
Yeah,
And it's not condemning them for doing that, but it was a nice symbol of their maturity, right? Their loss of innocence.
yeah, yeah. They're not because they are kids, but at the same time, that's the whole thing with the adolescent coming of age story, right? You
Exactly.
know,
Exactly. Now, that scene when Daryl is killed, what was your thought process like during that scene? Because the first time I suspected it was going to happen, but the way it was shot, it's shot in one take, the way it just builds, it still took my breath away when the actual death finally occurs.
yeah. It's just like you can't believe what you're watching.
Hmm.
You think like, I mean, Daryl's like a classic sort of like comic relief character, but they really kind of take that. It's almost like a little bit Lynchian, right? They kind of take that expectation you have so clearly, and then they just make him like this total asshole.
Yes.
and then he gets killed, right? Like, and he you're kind of just watching him holding his katana and cringing the whole time. At least I think that's what I remember.
Mhm.
It was we watched this for the first time a couple of years back, right?
Yeah.
2 or 3 years ago. So, I think we watched a couple more times since then, but it's hard for me to remember exactly what I thought, but I do remember cringing and thinking like, okay, they're just gonna, put it down, right? Just,
Well, it's a
stop.
perfect setup. You have a katana. It's like a Chekhov's gun, but a katana. And
Yeah,
that katana will be used to somebody's harm, to something bad will happen. So you're just waiting for that already. And again, I think the choice to shoot that in one scene to just let the tension build out in real time, that's one of the reasons it feels so authentic. It did not feel like a movie. It does not feel like you're watching a movie.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
the great thing. It's like a '90s movie that doesn't like slap you in the face with trying to, make you feel nostalgic or anything. It's literally just the details in the production design and the
Exactly.
lack of cell phone communication, which is a big deal in this movie. You couldn't have the same story, unless you had a reason these kids didn't have smartphones. If you said it in a modern setting, but
Modern day.
because of the way I mean, I think the directing and the production design kind of it almost like makes you forget that it's in the past, you know?
Well, the story is so natural and the actors are so natural that it's not like with Stranger Things that it's always drawing attention to its time period, its setting, where that's part of the charm. It just draws you into the story, and that's, I think, what a good period piece should do. You shouldn't be like focusing on the callbacks. You should
Yeah.
be paying attention to the story. And there's a great reason why this movie's set in the 90s. I can't imagine it not being in the 90s, like you said. And I think that's the perfect approach. That was the perfect way to do it, at least for a serious thing like this, a more dramatic thing.
Yeah.
And there's a good while before the killings start, before Josh starts killing people. I think there are a great number of like suspenseful sequences, but there's also a lot of dark humor. Did the humor land for you?
I think I think at the time it landed a lot. Like I'm not sure how much of it would hold up
Hmm.
for me today, but I thought it was really well done. And I really like the banter they have, when they're biking around the
Hmm.
town. You have a lot of sort of uh I don't know exactly how you describe it, just I would also like it's almost like a montage of them hanging out, but you don't really, it's not like set to music or anything. It's just sort of like ambient,
Hmm.
and then it gets more into and that really helps set the scene for the whole Daryl thing we were just talking about, right? Like by giving that kind of scenes at the beginning where you sort of establish this relationship and how they are normally interacting, it makes it even that much realer.
Yeah, it does a great job of setting the stage. But even after Daryl's killed, there are so many moments of humor, and I hesitate to call them humor because they're coming from such a weird place. But the thing I always think of is that they're in a classroom, and when Daryl's body is found and the principal is speaking over the speakers, announcing that news, there's a girl in the class who's taking her pen and is um, making sex noises as she's like flicking. Do you remember this? She's flicking the pen.
Yeah.
She pretends like she's like fucking. And it just like stays on her for so long. And I don't know if I'm supposed to laugh. I don't know if I
Yeah.
want to laugh, but it just registers so comedic nonetheless.
Or like when Josh shows up to drop off weed, for the
Mm.
girl. And I forget the character's name. Yeah, the one Emily Cappuccino's playing.
Miss
He asks if
Cappuccino,
they
we'll
have
call her.
milk.
Yeah.
Asks if they have milk, and then he chugs like a whole big glass of milk, like that's
Yeah.
full to the brim, and gets it all over his face. And or when he plays with the katana, like that stuff is hilarious in a dark way. Like
The actor playing
such a,
Josh,
such a
he,
jackass.
yeah. No, there are genuine funny moments with that character and that performance. And I think the actor was having a lot of fun. And that's the thing, right? Josh is a dweeby kid who's finally becoming a killer. And I think that's exactly how that would turn out in real life. That moment when at some point he says something like, "I'm the man." Like, yeah,
Yeah.
he does think he's the man.
He's like, I am the guy. I'm that fucking guy. Yeah.
I'm the fucking guy. You know, it's when he
Yeah.
drops off the weed, he's impressed these two girls because he can hook them up, and he's like, I'm the guy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just so ridiculous. Like, and that's why it's so believable, because people
Yeah.
really, you see videos on the internet, not of like killings like that, but of people just saying stupid shit,
And owning it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Taking it so seriously. And Zach, it's like Zach is a great guy in comparison. He's pretty much just a normal kid with his own problems. But he
Yeah.
kind of becomes a hero, as in a weird way at the end of the movie.
Well, they become antagonists. They become rivals, right? And I think it's more the love triangle than the murder that splits them apart. I think when Josh notices that Miss Cappuccino is favoring Zach, that's when I think he really sets off on this dark path, because he probably doesn't feel like he has anyone he can trust.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about some of the more suspenseful sequences. I think the sequence that had me like holding my breath in my chest as I was watching, it's such a simple scene. It's when Zach's mom comes into his room and says, "Hey, Daryl's parents haven't seen him. Apparently, you were hanging out with him. Do you know what happened?" And just that the direction is what does it. It's the pauses. It's what people don't say. It's like modern movies edit so quickly. I'm sure you know that, but
Oh,
modern
absolutely.
movies, it's just ridiculous. It's like they cut movies with a weed whacker. And this just stays on these actors and lets them really drive the scene home.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a great scene. Like everything, or the scene with the middle school kid, who's talking to Zach. Like those kind of scenes are really interesting, really suspenseful. Yeah, I think when Josh sort of at the campfire and they're sort of talking to is like um that kind of dialogue where you're seeing the character shift and there's nothing they can do about it.
Mm.
Those are really good moments, and they kind of pause, they kind of hold on that stuff instead of trying to fit in more scenes of more. They could have had a lot more action scenes in the movie, right?
Oh, they
Like they could
totally
have
could have.
shown the second killing.
I mean, the plot of this, when you think of it, it could be like an I Know What You Did Last Summer,
Yeah,
or one of those movies where they kill somebody and then more murders happen. Who's doing it? It could have totally gone that direction. And I think I read some reviews where people felt like it did become more of a typical slasher movie by the end. And I don't agree with that. I think it was smart to actually go in that direction of seeing what this murder does to offset these people, right? It was still psychological in nature.
yeah, no, definitely. I think that I mean, the typical slasher film really wouldn't have sort of the weakness of the killer, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Josh is not necessarily that scary, except for the fact that it's someone they care about,
Or he's
in some way.
creepy. He's creepy. He's not intimidating per se,
Yeah.
like Jason or Michael Myers. It's very unsettling to see him do his thing, though. And we're at the ending, the showdown, so to speak, between Zach and Josh, and that just creeped me out. Just watching Josh, just like he looks at Zach, and it's so inhuman. It's so
Yeah.
detached, right?
Yeah. And the setup is more like the character from Christine than from like a Jason type. Like just like a kid who kind of gets this object, right? And it
Mm.
kind of changes their world in a way.
Yeah, because he's bullied, he's repressed, he's angry at the world. And I think they also drop little hints in this movie that I appreciate. Like there's just one line about how Josh's parents are never around, but that one line really explains a lot.
Yeah. You never see him with any his brothers aren't there, you never see his parents.
Exactly. And
No
his
one's
brother's
ever
off to war.
no one's concerned that he was, involved with this killing at all. Like not like Zach's, his mom asked about it. No
Yeah,
one's
nobody
concerned.
notices.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And when Zach arrives to the house of the girls and he's scared that Josh has killed them. Now, Josh has killed one girl. He didn't kill Miss Cappuccino, but at some point, Zach picks up like a fire poker. And I'm like a little nervous, like, are they going to do like a sword fight kind of thing? Like, that seems really cheesy for this movie. And then Zach just immediately drops the fire poker and he just runs out the house. I'm like, perfect, perfect. You know, like
Yeah.
that's the authentic thing. They've stuck with their grounded tone.
Right, because he really, I mean, he's going out of his way throughout like the second half of the movie to not get Josh in trouble and not alienate him, even though he pretty much, really, his better judgment should tell him, this guy is kind of gone off the rails. He's a danger to other people.
Yeah, and he does realize that, and that's when he has to become a hero, a reluctant hero. And those are my favorite kind of protagonists in movies, when they have to rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
But another thing we haven't really hit on, and this to me is such an essential part of the movie, the cinematography.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite shot, or a shot you remember the best?
Yeah, I remember the shot, like the shots with Josh, the campfire are really good. Some of the dream sequence or early movie shots, sort of have this ethereal kind of tone with Miss Cappuccino's character. And really, I like the bike riding shots and the outdoor, kind of hazy sort of East Coast afternoons they capture. I think it's an anamorphic, I'm not sure, but it has that kind of nice blend between like wide shots with nice depth of field, and then you get some close shots with a tasteful amount of background blur, but not like the excessive amount I think some digital cinematography uses. And that's my take on it. That's my take on the shooting of it.
Yeah, and from a film student perspective, this is like a wet dream, basically, like the mastery of the camera, but just the visuals too, and how they speak to the story. The shot I love the best is at the end when Josh is sitting in the back of the car, the cop car. Obviously, he's been captured, and there's just a little light on his face, and he and Zach have this kind of staring contest, and then Josh just turns his head and he goes completely into the dark. It's like he's totally disappeared from the light. He has receded from human decency, human connection. Yeah, no, that was chilling. That was really chilling.
Yeah, that's a great shot. And so it really is the scene with Daryl, when they show like the body and everyone kind of how they react to it. Like that stuff is really really good blocking too, right? With the crowd scenes, I think, in this movie. That helps. Having that good blocking helps with the cinematography.
Absolutely. And I'm really bitter that this doesn't have a Blu-ray release. This is a Blu-ray movie. It
doesn't?
No, it doesn't. I've looked. I think European countries have a Blu-ray release, but not in North America.
That's really weird. Yeah,
weird.
I would think this movie should be more popular. No, go watch it. I think.
Now I will. I will admit that there are things that are going to test the patience of, let's say, a typical audience, a mainstream audience. It is slower than a normal thriller, a typical thriller. It is kind of more ethereal and abstract. So I get why it's not, why it's not the next Halloween or something that's really designed to be that crowd pleaser. But it definitely deserves a lot more credit. And I think, man, I would love to see like the Criterion Collection do a release of this movie, because I think it has that much artistic merit.
Yeah, it really kind of stands apart from a lot of high school movies.
Yeah,
it's really it's nice to see a more mature and reflective take on these type of relationships, because I think you can get written off as just being like, oh, this is juvenile characters, a juvenile movie.
Now I will say another interesting thing is that even when the killings do start, it's still subverting your expectations. Like the middle schooler who was also there when Daryl died, I was sure he'd be the next victim. Josh was going to kill him to keep him quiet. That doesn't happen at all. Like Josh kills some random guy he doesn't like.
Yeah.
That was perfect too, because again, it's going back to that apathy. It's just this general state of kind of hating the world. It's like the Columbine kids didn't kill people who, like, they didn't have a motivation when they went in there and shot up the school. They just hated everyone, and they felt like it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak on too much on the Columbine as far as I've read a little bit about it, but in this movie at least, you get the sense that Josh just doesn't understand or care about the consequences at all. Like they're not really, he's not really weighing the options like like an adult would. Oh, I could go to jail for the rest of my life. All these people's families, blah blah blah. It's really just like you said, apathy and contempt. Ultimately,
Now,
so
let's talk about that fan theory that I
yeah,
think we've talked about this before, correct?
Yes, you're gonna have to remind me a little bit, but I
So
believe I've heard this before.
yeah, it's the popular fan theory from this movie is that Miss Cappuccino's character is the one who is pulling Josh's strings. She was the one who told him to keep killing, that she was in on the whole thing. And when you watch it a second time, there are definitely things that would lead you to that conclusion. I'm not going to call them hints because I don't know the director's intention, but it's certainly not, it doesn't come from nowhere, right?
Yes, and the intro sequence, I think, with the dead deer, right?
Right, which we didn't talk about.
That's a big, and that's one of those ethereal shots I was mentioning a moment ago, right? Like, but that whole sequence to me is a big indicator, and both that and her character, kind of bookending the movie, right, with the last scene as well.
Yeah, it's so
that
interesting.
says a lot about that theory.
Because we don't know the fates of either Josh or Zach. We see them getting arrested by the police, and then we end with Miss Cappuccino's character having been freed from captivity. She's going back to school. She has like a scar on the back of her neck. And first time I saw it, I was spellbound. I was puzzled. And dare I say, I was annoyed, right? Because I think indie movies have this weird pattern of just never giving you conclusive endings anymore.
Yeah.
Even the ones I really love, it like they really choose to not do that a lot of the time. But this one, when I heard that theory, everything clicked about that. Everything made sense about that decision. So maybe it was intentional. It could very well be.
She just has like a level of coolness, almost coldness in certain points in the movie, that make you, I think that, well, I think the performance is really good. I just think you could see it, and you could see it that way. I remember it being a little bit controversial when you first brought that up, though. Am I mistaken?
Controversial.
I remember having a big argument about that.
Maybe that's very possible. I think there's a debate about that to be had, because if that's true, well, that completely changes her character, and one of the most likable characters becomes one of the most detestable. So it's a big thing that would change the entire perspective on the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like to say pulling the strings, that's like kind of one step above, maybe what you could assume kind of egging on Zach and Josh, and probably knows they both like her. But to say like, pulling the strings to murders, that's like, that it really does change the character.
Yeah, now I will say the first time I watched it, I just thought, oh, she really has a lot of patience for Zach, like an unusual level of patience. And I just thought that was her character. I didn't read too much into it. But if she knows something and she's trying to get Zach to come clean about what happened to Daryl, I feel like that is a much more, that works better as an interpretation than, oh, she just really likes Zach and she's just hanging out with him a lot.
Oh yeah.
Just because she likes him. Now, this movie came out very close to another film called Summer of '84. Did you ever see Summer of '84?
No.
That was another limited release thing that I saw. I actually do have a Blu-ray of that, and that one is also very reminiscent of Stranger Things, but that really leans into the nostalgia. So that movie's about these kids who one of them thinks his next door neighbor is a serial killer. And the comparison between this and Stranger Super Dark Times is just really interesting. And I would recommend anyone who really likes this movie to check out that other one, because they are pretty interesting companion pieces, because they both feel like a response to Stranger Things in a big way.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's my
Yeah.
own recommendation. Can you think of any other movies like this? Any other thing that you feel belong in the category with this movie?
You know, that's hard to say. I want to say no, it's pretty unique because of to me at least. I'd want to think about that more.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that one a little bit more.
It does stand testament to this movie, though, that it really does seem to stand on its own. Even though it's not taking the most unique premise in the world, it's still hard to compare it with other movies. It feels original, totally original.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like the other movies I would bring up, they only have some of the similar elements, you know, but not really over. It's not really the same kind of thing overall. Like
Yeah.
you could bring up a movie like The Virgin Suicides, but it's really different than that in so many ways, you know.
It's so interesting that you bring up The Virgin Suicide. Do you remember watching that?
Oh yeah, I definitely do. I remember.
Yeah.
I remember shitting on that movie. I
Talk
think.
about controversial. Yeah.
Yeah. But I
Those
mean, it's probably a freaking movie, you know. All in all.
I think it is, and I think that movie that came out in the 90s, and I think there was just a real sense of apathy from that generation, right? I mean, that it's so famous, you know, the grunge period and the MTV period. I think everyone could sense it, and that's always a fascinating topic to return to. What was the cause of that apathy? Some people say video games. I think Super Dark Times is a much more nuanced look into that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's, you know, you could bring up other movies. You know, you could bring up like Basketball Diaries or stuff like that. But it's really not the same kind of, you know, it's really got its own thing going on. So
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I was thinking of watching this movie, I just kept thinking about Columbine. It felt clearly like we're going to explore the mindset and the atmosphere of Columbine, even though they don't shoot up a school. It's yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, you get the school setting in the movie and kind of you get all sort of the elements, but it doesn't go into this route with like, you know, guns and
No.
I think I kind of like that. I think that if it was a gun, you know, and Josh is just shooting people, it would be a little bit harder to watch in some
Oh
ways.
no. Yeah.
Also, you
I
know,
mean,
I don't know.
the katana is iconic. That is the iconic image from this movie. So
Yeah.
yeah, you would lose a lot if it were just a gun or a switchblade or any kind of generic thing.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, it's unique and it's it also is kind of cinematic, you know, callbacks to like you know, just samurai movies
Like
and
Kurosawa, yeah.
feel like that. Yeah, you know, it's you can always shoot a samurai sword in an interesting way. So
Yeah. Well, to quote the Bare Naked Ladies, I make mad films. Okay, I don't make films, but if I did, they'd have a samurai.
yeah.
Wait, no. The actual line goes, like Kurosawa, I make mad films. No, I don't make films, but if I did, they'd have a samurai.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Classic.
a classic line from my favorite Canadian rock band.
What about Rush? No.
Screw you, Nickelback. No.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
it's been good, man.
Yeah. This was a fun discussion. A great movie to talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hope to discuss more movies with you in the future on here. And thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, guys. So check out Super Dark Times. It's on Netflix. It's on other streaming sites. It's on DVD. And yeah, just help grow its audience, because that is a movie that really deserves one. And I hope to see more work from this director. I don't think he's made another feature since, but I really hope that he, because if he's this good in his debut, imagine what he could do further on.
Yeah, this guy would be a good candidate for maybe one of those Amazon Prime movies or something. They're making. It'd be cool to see him explore other genres too.
Sure. Yeah. No, just the direction. He just knows how to tell a story with a camera.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you again, Mitchell. All right, guys, like the video if you want, subscribe if you want, and stay tuned for more content in the future.